Good afternoon. Welcome to the program. It is rare for the media industry to unite on much these days, but it's done so powerfully today on the issue of defending your right to know what your government is doing and how your taxpayers' dollars are being spent. Yes, this is a campaign about press freedom and ensuring journalists aren't locked up for doing their job. But the message from media companies in this extraordinary show of force today is that this isn't just about themselves. Why shouldn't we all be able to find out, for example, which nursing homes are responsible for some 4,000 reports of residents being assaulted last year? We're not allowed to know. Why shouldn't a whistleblower be able to reveal that the tax office can access your bank account without you knowing? The blacking out of front pages across the country today sent a powerful message about this secrecy. And it was driven home by media bosses, including the executive chairman of News Corp, Michael Miller.
Since 2001, there's been 75 pieces of legislation which have restricted journalists to be able to do their job. And that you've got to, in a democracy, it's a responsibility of the government to be open to the public. And the public don't feel they're getting that same openness back from government.
Here in Canberra, press gallery members showed their support as well, uniting out the front of Parliament House. There's a particular concern here right now about one of our colleagues, News Corp's Annika Smethurst, whose home was raided by the federal police. She still has the threat of prosecution and indeed jail hanging over her head. So do the ABC journalists Dan Oakes and Sam Clark. Labor says the government should at the very least rule out charging these journalists. And Anthony Albanese raised this in question time this afternoon.
I refer to the front page of every major
Leader of the
newspaper
Opposition
today.
knows the rules on props.
Yeah, and I'm just holding them up briefly, Mr Speaker.
The clock's
Will
ticking.
the Prime Minister now rule out prosecuting ABC journalists Dan Oakes and Sam Clark and News Corp journalist Annika Smethurst for doing their jobs? Does the Prime Minister agree that journalism is not a crime?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I agree that journalism is not a crime, but I agree also, and I wonder if the Leader of the Opposition agrees, that if people, whatever profession they're in, whether they're politicians, whether they're journalists, whether they're anyone, Mr Speaker, public officials, there is no one in this country, Mr Speaker, who is above the law. People should not be prosecuted for their profession. They should only be prosecuted if indeed they have been found to be falling foul of the law, Mr Speaker.
Members on my left, the member for Chifley.
I do not believe that those decisions about who should be prosecuted at the end of the day should be made on the whim of politicians.
Indeed, the decision on whether to charge a journalist shouldn't be made at the whim of a politician. But that's exactly what's now going to happen. The Attorney-General has decreed that he will have the power to veto any prosecution of a journalist from now on, but only once the AFP has completed its work. He says that still hasn't happened in the case of these three journalists we're talking about, the ones currently under investigation. Only once the AFP decides whether to charge them or not, will he then consider whether to stop that happening. Coming up later in the program, I'll be talking to the Shadow Attorney-General, Mark Dreyfus, for his thoughts on this power and what protections should be given to journalists. There are plenty, of course, who have no sympathy for journalists at all. We're not exactly high in the popularity stakes. Barnaby Joyce is one of those clearly scarred by his dealings with the media in recent years.
It cuts both ways, right? I understand your imperative of the public interest test. I really do. But you can't say putting a private individual, a pregnant woman crossing the street on your front page is in the public interest, which you did, and then giving yourself a Walkley for it. You've got to understand that in these issues, to get respect around the term public interest, you've got to act in the public interest and be basically indissoluble in that process.
Without reliving that whole saga, there were legitimate questions being raised by Barnaby Joyce's own colleagues at the time about his affair with a staffer, whether it was appropriate, how it was affecting his work and so on. Look, his general point is valid. The media doesn't always have the greatest reputation for trust and reliability. Still, when it comes to accessing important information and exposing wrongdoing, the media's role in holding the powerful to account is fundamental to the health of our democracy. And right now, it is harder than ever accessing even basic information.